we begin our show with the NATO Summit and a series of crucial meetings that could shape the future of the war in Ukraine.
This morning, Ukraine's President Zelenskyy is joining NATO leaders on day 2 of the summit. He's meeting with several leaders, including President Biden. Zelensky's appearance comes one day after NATO said Ukraine does have a future inside the military alliance, but rebuffed his call to set a timeline for membership. Zelenskyy is blasting that decision. Here's what NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg had to say after meeting with Zelenskyy.
Ukraine is now closer to NATO than ever before. Allies reaffirmed that Ukraine will become a member of the alliance and agreed to remove the requirement for a membership action plan. This will change Ukraine's membership path from a 2-step process to a 1-step process. And we will issue an invitation for Ukraine to join NATO when allies agree that conditions are met.
In just a few moments, we'll hear from the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor. But first, we want to kick things off with NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. Monica, she is in Lithuania. Good morning to you. So we know that this timeline for Ukraine's NATO membership is not quite what President Zelenskyy would have hoped for. Spell it out. What exactly is the alliance's position? What's Zelensky's reaction here?
Exactly, Joe. President Zelenskyy wasn't shy about his displeasure with what NATO leaders agreed to in that communique yesterday, with those 2 key points spelled out. The fact that they won't be able to even be invited to join until allies can agree, because some security reforms need to be met as well as democratic ones. And also they need to completely agree on what can happen once the war is resolved, of course, as it continues to rage on in Ukraine as it defends itself against Russia. So the timeline for that is not what President Zelenskyy wanted, but he did soften his tone after arriving here, thanking the leaders for their continued support when it comes to weapons and defense spending, but of course saying that he wants to see more, and he wanted that in the short term. So while yesterday focused on what he wasn't able to get, today the focus is going to be all about what Ukraine will be receiving. So we did see his disappointment turn into some gratitude, and I think you'll expect to see that between President Biden and President Zelenskyy when they come face to face just a short couple of hours from now, with President Biden being the one to say over the weekend first he didn't think Ukraine was ready to join NATO yet, again, given this timeline. But the fact that it can be fast-tracked once that invitation is extended was something that Ukrainian officials welcomed, even though, again, they want to say they would like to be more included, though now their status has been upgraded to the fact that they can actually call a meeting with all of the members of NATO at any point as they continue again to defend themselves in the face of Russian aggression, Joe.
So the issue of Ukraine's NATO membership aside, we know Zelenskyy is meeting President Biden this morning along with a host of other leaders. What kind of support is on the table right now?
Yeah, and there's going to be a new announcement from the G7 leaders here, effectively trying to help Ukraine improve its military to deter any further attack from Russia or anyone else. So what that means is really a long-term security commitment, and then also the ability for some NATO countries to negotiate their own bilateral agreements with Ukraine when it comes to security. Here at NATO, they've really wanted to emphasize the fact that the countries are supposed to pledge 2% of their GDP to defense spending, but they want to make sure that that's now seen as a floor, as a minimum, and not the ceiling, so that countries can continue to do more. And we've already seen countries like Germany and France continue to pledge more help here, with some other NATO countries saying they will help to train Ukrainian pilots on those critical F-16 fighter jets that Ukraine had been asking for so long, that the U.S. finally pledged recently, Joe.
And Monica, we understand President Biden will also give a speech later today after the summit. Real quick, what is the message he's expected to deliver?
The big message here is that if you look at when the start of the war took place and what President Putin then expected to happen when he wanted to, in the words of the U.S., divide the West, that the fact that the NATO alliance is stronger than ever, President Biden is going to say, is a clear indication that President Putin has lost that, at least, attempt. Even though the war is ongoing, 500-plus days and counting, they're going to say that the unity here and the show of support for Ukraine has never been stronger. It continues to be unwavering, and that the only person who should really come out of the entirety of this disappointed, in fact, is Vladimir Putin.
Joe. All right. Monica, thanks so much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.